Well, here we are. I most definitely did not want to do this, but enough of you kindly let me know I'd have a mutiny on my hands if I procrastinated anymore, so here it is. Resident Evil, welcome to Raccoon City. This is going to be a video covering what very well may be one of the most bland and thoroughly frustrating movies I've ever sat through, keeping in mind I've watched Silent Hill Revelation. And I guess now you're going to have to sit through me talking about how bad this is, so let's go ahead and get on with it. And remember, you did this to yourselves. What's up, guys? I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews. Welcome to the Resident Evil Retrospective. Alright, so I'm gonna have to level with you guys. I am not an angry reviewer. I'm not interested in consuming bad content, and the last thing I want to do is have you guys sit through a bunch of videos for stuff I really don't enjoy or find interesting, but this is something different. Not only have I gained a bit of a reputation as the Resident Evil guy here on YouTube, but aside from contractual obligations, this movie pulled the wool over my eyes in a very weird way. See, I've always at least sort of enjoyed the Resident Evil films. Sure, they're nothing like the games, and at their worst, they were so bad I actively cringed at my screen, but they always gave me some kind of entertainment, even when it was in a so bad it's good type of way. That being said, like you, I would have given my right arm for a movie that would do the series justice, and for a long time, that is exactly how this was sold to me. And not just this. Infinite Darkness, the Netflix CG animated show, was in on it too. And yes, we will definitely get to that one in due time, but until then, these both were presented almost like an apology for the Anderson flicks. Kind of like Capcom knew they had wronged us before, but now the reins were back in their hands and they were finally going to right a historic wrong. Now obviously they didn't do that. I'm not going to force you guys to watch all the way to the end of this thing to find out how I really feel because, well, let's be honest, if you like RE, you've likely heard about how bad this movie is, and I am here to tell you, you heard right. I don't think I'm going to be surprising anyone when I say this thing is a trash fire in every sense of the term, but maybe in making this video I can get a little catharsis. You know, get things off the proverbial chest, and if you guys end up having fun at my expense, well, all the better. Oh, I guess we should stop stalling and get into this thing, but before we do, I want to give a bit of a spoiler warning. Moving forward, we will definitely ruin this movie's story, but to be fair, it also did that itself. So if you find yourself wanting to make the mistake of seeing this thing, go ahead and do that first, then come back here and let me know how much you regret it. For the rest of us though, let's go ahead and get started. That is, unless you guys changed your minds. No? Well, I guess it was worth a try. So first things first, we start off with a massive retcon. Something that's not too surprising in the world of RE live-action films, but again, this was sold to us as a movie for the fans. Twitter was blowing up with posts about Welcome to Raccoon City's Easter eggs. People figured, hey, if they're going to include references like Itchy Tasty and Jill Sandwich, it's got to be accurate, right? And then bam, first few seconds of the movie has Chris and Claire in an orphanage that is run by William Birkin. And not only is that unnecessarily dumb, but since we're here, why don't we throw in a Lisa Trevor cameo for good measure, I guess? Well, anyways, child Claire follows Lisa and has a 3-second interaction with her, and keep that number in mind because we will get back to it. So Birkin gets Claire and Chris back to bed, and then there's this really odd scene where he looks the room up and down and says goodnight as if he's talking to someone specific, but then it cuts to him leaving. So it ends up looking like two separate scenes, maybe shot on different days and edited together poorly. That's coming from someone who's not very good at video editing. Then the movie gives us our first real jump scare, and we cut to a reference to the intro of RE2 Remake, and you know, we might as well keep track of these, so let's get a senseless Easter egg counter set up here. There we go. The whole time, Claire maintains this quiet, edgy mood, so the entire scene is just the trucker saying exposition for the audience's behalf to Claire. Dude's all like, where'd you say you were going? Oh yeah, Raccoon City. Going to visit your brother, was it? Didn't you used to live there? Guys, there are ways to weave exposition into dialogue a little more subtly than this. Speaking of subtlety, the guy makes a move on Claire, and just as he does, he plows into some woman walking across the road. There is a double entendre there, I'm sure of it. The two jump out of the truck to check things out and then proceed to argue so viciously that neither of them is able to notice a dead body standing up not even a full 5 feet from them when they're looking in that direction. And of course, instead of attacking them, she scuttles off without a trace because horror movies. Then the trucker's dog gets out and just eats the woman's guts, which I assure you will be the grossest thing by far you will see in this movie. A scene immediately followed by a shot so campy, I genuinely thought it was intentional when I first saw it. For whatever reason, Claire just stands there looking at the very clear image of the woman they hit, or some other woman, I guess, looking back at her, and instead of attempting any kind of communication, she just stares. Keeping in mind, this is one of two possibilities. One, this is a woman that Claire just watched get creamed by a Mack truck and is now getting up and looking at her. Or two, this is a witness who saw Claire be party to vehicular manslaughter at the very best. So the two exchange glances, and then the movie hard cuts to the Resident Evil logo, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the original font from the first game's non-long box release, but without the drop shadow. And looking back, yeah, that does seem to check out. I feel like that's definitely worth counting. And as we get this very cool looking landscape shot of Raccoon City, there's a little text dump letting us know that this version of the old RC is actually going through a bit of a transition right now. Much like the games, Umbrella employs nearly everyone, and now they're packing up and leaving, which I actually thought was a really nice touch. It's essentially the pharmaceutical equivalent of an old dried up mining town in the mountains, and out of all the changes, I think this might be the only one that's purely just a good idea. Now, was it necessary in a property that already has a full and complete story that stands on its own? No, definitely not, but hey, credit where credit's due. We then cut to one scene that might as well define Leon's entire character in this movie, and I really mean that. Whoever wrote this thing genuinely had a hate boner for this guy. Throughout the entire film, not a single scene goes by where Leon isn't shit on in some way, and this is a perfect example. Instead of an altruistic Boy Scout who was caught in a rough situation on his first day on the job, we have a drunk who wakes up late for his shifts. And I really don't understand this change. It doesn't make any narrative sense, and we already had a character who was fully formed and fully fleshed out. We did not need this. Anyways, here we get an introduction to Wesker, Jill, and Richard, and apparently in this universe, Jill's the marksman of the group, so whatever. They hinted this a bit here, but as the movie goes on, they develop this unrequited love thing between Jill and old Albert, something that, like most changes made in this movie, seems to have no real narrative purpose, other than a seemingly diehard dedication to altering every single minute detail of the original narrative for no reason whatsoever. Oh, and Jill sandwich reference. Keeping with that same tradition, Leon is now a disgraced cop who accidentally shot his own partner and had to have his rich dad pull strings to get him assigned to a small town precinct. And by the way, totally off subject, but are we to believe a beat cop from a small mountain town in the 90s wore Kevlar all the time? I don't know, that seems suspect at the least. Well, all of the real, non-joke characters pile out of the diner, leaving just Leon to talk with the waitress, whose eye begins to bleed, and the very best part is, neither of them even remotely find that alarming. In fact, they were way more disturbed at the idea that a crow flew into a window. My man's priorities are all fucked up. Claire gets dropped off by the trucker in the next scene, and let's just say the obvious happens. Next, she makes her way to her brother's house, and Jimmy's the lock to get in, but not before we are introduced to this idiocy masquerading as suspense. Once inside, she goes through Chris's things, and he eventually makes an appearance. We learn that Claire has been gone for about 5 years, and in her absence, Chris has grown close to Birkin, seeing him as a father figure. After those blanks get filled in, Claire reveals why she's come back after all these years. Apparently, she's been communicating with some guy in a chat room, bringing about one of the few truly funny lines in the movie.
Okay, so I've been talking to this guy in a chat room.
What the fuck's a chat room?
So this nerd right here is Ben from RE2, but instead of a scoop-hungry journalist, he's essentially a conspiracy-obsessed Redditor. Of course, except for the fact that we can actually prove this guy's spoken to a woman before. Moving on, Ben lays out the idea that Umbrella is purposefully infecting Raccoon City with the T-virus, and we're gonna have to come back to that point because I'm not really sure they actually use the term T-virus in the movie. Oh, and by the way, this is a trash VHS effect they're using here. No joke, I'm applying a much more convincing filter over the video you're watching right now, and keep in mind this is a nearly $40 million production we're talking about. The movie, not my video. VFX aside though, the key points are already laid out here. Umbrella is jumping ship to a new town, and for some reason they think this one needs to be destroyed in order for that to happen. So they are en masse infecting the entire town with a pathogen that will not only kill them but also turn them into the Walking Dead. Something you might think would draw attention to the giant pharmaceutical company that up until a week ago occupied that town. Oh, and by the way, just in case you were wondering, we never get a better explanation than this concerning Umbrella's motives. So as far as we're concerned, the secondhand speculation of a conspiracy theorist is the cold hard truth here. Well, if you can believe it, Chris is not buying the information that was given to Claire through the mail on a VHS tape, and we're taken to old Bill Birkin's house where he comforts his daughter after a nightmare, and he gets the shit has hit the fan phone call just as an air raid siren starts going off. Well, Chris decides to head to the RPD, and Claire gets left alone, leading to the most stupid and poorly thought out Easter egg yet, followed by easily the most phoned-in line the movie has to offer. The woman from before crashes into the house at a full sprint and actually screams the words, "Itchy Tasty." I'm not joking when I say I feel like it would be a lot more tasteful if the movie just started with the Resident Evil voice. So Claire, in a totally character-appropriate move, gets the hell out of there, essentially leaving a child to be eaten by its mother, and we cut to Raccoon City's police department, which actually looks really damn cool. Kudos to whoever designed the set. I just wish that same attention to detail was applied to, well, I don't know, the entire movie maybe? Moving into the star's office, Jill gives a verbal nod to RE1, asking Wesker how he'd rather die, eaten by a huge snake or a great white, and then Chief Irons walks in, and without a doubt his is the most well-acted role in the movie by a country mile. Which is definitely not to say that any of the other actors are unconvincing. I mean, I get the feeling they're all doing what they can with what they were given, but you can just really tell Donald Logue is giving it his all here. And maybe I'm being a little partial to the guy since his lines are the only ones that include jokes that actually land, but either way, he improves every single scene he's in. Moving on, the chief tells the guys in stars to suit up and go looking for the two cops from the beginning of the movie who were last seen investigating a dead body found near the Spencer mansion. And then yet another significant amount of lines in the movie's script is dedicated to absolutely dunking on Leon, and Wesker gets an ominous message on his pager. In his locker, he finds a PDA letting him know Raccoon City is as good as nuclear ash, and we get a good amount of setup for what's going to be a pretty okay zombie outbreak sequence. I mean, it's no Dawn of the Dead remake or anything, but it certainly gets the job done. Then we're given this very awesome shot of the entrance of the precinct, but immediately taking away from that is the scene where the truck crashes. First off, it is very ridiculous to expect the viewer to believe that Leon would not only not feel, but also hear the explosion happening like 20 feet away from his face. It's not like he's wearing some kind of modern noise-canceling IEMs. These are old-fashioned over-the-ear headphones. But more egregious than that is when Jennifer Page's It's a Little Crush is cranked to full volume while a burning person walks casually into the building. I can't let you guys hear how it sounds for obvious copyright reasons, but it drowns out everything else, and I sort of get what they were going for here. A little juxtaposition, right? But it ends up coming off as more comical than anything else. It's very odd. After Irons blasts the zombie, he lets on that he knows a little more than we might have previously thought when he warns Leon to lock the gates since there may be others coming. There's no real time to expand on that though, because he is very swiftly getting out of there, of course while demolishing what little bit of Leon's confidence that's left. And listen, I know I can be very petty with these reviews, but honestly, this is an underground parking garage, so how the hell did the ground get so wet? I know wet pavement is always going to look more moody, especially in a horror flick, but come on. Getting back with Alpha Team, we see the investigation is well underway, and I'm going to go ahead and call this whole chopper sequence an Easter egg. The crew touches down and heads into the Spencer mansion, which apparently exists like inside an actual forest and not on land surrounded by one. Even if this place was abandoned since the 70s, I don't think fully grown trees would be maybe 5 steps away from the front door at this point. Call me picky, but this just looks like a movie set plopped down in a real location. Not very convincing. Once they're inside though, things do look pretty okay. I mean, personally, I would have preferred a different color palette, but hey, for this movie it's not bad. Wesker tells everyone to split up, and then we cut back to Irons, who's trying to escape the city and finding out pretty fast that he's not going to get very far. And in this scene, I was really thrown off by the hand-operated camera here jutting around like this was some kind of talk show. It just doesn't fit because we haven't seen this method used in the movie before, and typically you would do something like this in a scene with a lot of action, sort of mirroring the audience being there and looking from one focal point to the next naturally. To be honest, I'm not really sure how to put it, but it just doesn't fit very well and it feels really out of place. Like, you're not supposed to notice cinematography unless you're looking for it in a movie, but in this one scene I was wondering what the hell they were doing. And to continue bitching, because apparently that's all I ever do, the way this scene was shot with only 2 umbrella guards being visible and the bridge's supports obscuring the background, it seems to me they did not have a lot of budget left over when it came time to shoot this scene. And listen, I get that they're not working with a lot here, but there's gotta be a less cheap looking way to shoot this than what we're looking at here. So the UMB troops open fire and we get more of this shaky action cam for exactly this one scene in the movie, and once again they have licensed music cranked to 11 for this part while actual sound effects are lowered. I'm really not sure what feel they were going for with these gimmicks, but if the goal was to take me completely out of the experience, then mission fucking accomplished, boys. Heading back to the RPD, Leon is looking at the gathering horde who, I guess, can speak. I don't know, maybe they're going through the first stages of turning, but it still seems corny to me. The chief pulls back into the precinct, and we get our first fully formed Cerberus and a scene breaking continuity since Irons had 5 rounds left in his revolver before he left the RPD, but came back with an empty weapon that needed to be reloaded on site. Call me crazy, I just don't think someone with police training would be driving around with an empty firearm in what is essentially an emergency situation. To be fair though, I can totally see why he would be out when he shoots like this. Oh, and can we just take a very short moment to really appreciate the Ugandan cinema tier CGI on display here? Well, even bad CG can be dangerous, so Claire brains the thing, and after a brief bit of dialogue, we jump back to the Spencer mansion. The STARS members have elected to split up, and Wesker is following the instructions on his Palm Pilot, something I assume he wouldn't want to do out in the open in plain view of another police officer, but hey, what are you gonna do? From here, we get to catch up with Chris, and the zombie reveal from RE1 is actually handled pretty well here. I mean, sure, it's a little funny that Chris is trying to stop this neck wound from bleeding by applying pressure to the guy's chest, but at this point, I'll take my wins wherever I can get them. With Chris busy not doing much of anything at all for the guy bleeding out on the ground, Richard splinters off on his own and comes across the old Spencer Mansion welcoming committee. And honestly, it's a pretty good zombie action scene if you ask me. Sure, the cinematography is not great, showing a little too much of the environment in the shots, and the lack of knowledgeable people working on post-processing stuff like color grading leads to this looking like some sort of found footage thing, but compared to what we've seen so far, it's not horrible. Right when things are getting interesting, the movie cuts to Brad, who's in the middle of a game of Snake when the dead come calling, and keeping with a rapid-fire pace, we cut again to Jill and Wesker, who, despite being in the same house as a heated firefight, can't seem to hear an MP5 and 12-gauge shotgun going off in rapid succession. Wesker sits down in front of a piano, and I bet you can just guess what he starts playing. By the way, quick question, why the hell isn't Jill playing this? Well, anyways, that's one more reference for the counter, and we get what is the single best looking and most convincing visual effects scene in the movie. After Brad defies Cannon and crashes his helicopter into the mansion, we're transported back to Leon and Claire, who are in the middle of finding out budget cuts have the RPD's armory looking a little more barren than you'd like. Leon asks Claire how she knows how to handle weapons so well, and her response is hilarious. She mentions being an orphan and a runaway and says she had to learn how to handle herself on the streets. Now, I'm not 100% where she ran away to after the orphanage, but I'm assuming it was to some Sudanese child soldier unit because there are homeless orphans that grew up in South Central LA that don't know how to clear a jam in a pump-action shotgun. And I think the most funny thing about this scene is how, in service of Claire becoming this self-insert, flawless Mary Sue, they thought a good explanation for why a police officer with weapons training can't clear this jam, but a random civvy can, is because one of them had parents and the other one didn't. I'm over here feeling like an asshole for having a mom and dad when I could have had superpowers. Then, in some kind of a clairvoyant act in reading the audience's mind, Leon says, "Hey, I bet you're wondering what a guy like me is doing as a cop." You know, like he's finally about to reveal something that would make him less of a joke character. And when Claire says, "Yes, I was wondering that," Leon, instead of actually answering the question he just posed, says, "Yeah, me too." Jesus, come on. At this point, I am totally ready to draft up a video proving RE1 had a much more well-written script than this garbage. Interrupting the lack of genuine human interaction, Leon comes across Ben, who's screaming to be let out of a cell with a pre-zombie in it. And the comedic timing here is actually pretty good.
Him? Oh yeah, no, he's fucking fine, yeah.
Speaking of comedy, Ben is able to trick Leon, getting a hold of his gun and forcing him to let him out. Of course, this being welcome to Raccoon City, Ben keeps his back to the guy he just said out loud is turning into a zombie, and we get a great-looking member of The Walking Dead to look at. This movie is so schizophrenic, it jumps from pretty okay stuff to dull about as frequently and abruptly as it changes scenes between the multiple stories taking place, and it is very jarring to deal with. So the Deadhead attacks Leon, and listen, I get that Claire is some kind of a plot god who knows literally everything and is lacking in any and all flaws, but she just hip-fired a shotgun from across the room at a target that was on top of a person she presumably did not want to shoot. Oh, and not to dwell on that too long, what you're seeing right here is the first and last time Leon fires his weapon. A whole-ass 2-hour Resident Evil film starring Leon fucking Kennedy, and the guy only fires a total of 12 rounds all in one scene, hitting just one bad guy. Stellar work. Back again to the Spencer mansion, Wesker explains to Jill that he's working for a mystery organization who wants to get their hands on Umbrella's secrets, and then he shoots a zombie. Except he shouldn't really know these things exist. So far, the people in Raccoon City, Brad, Chris, and Richard are the only people who have ever even seen a zombie. Heading back to the RPD because who the hell cares about good pacing, we get a few shots of the town being overrun, and now's probably a good time to talk about the stupid noise they gave zombies in this movie. We all know how they're supposed to sound, but for some reason these guys gave them this dumb-sounding, high-pitched demon screech. It's mixed really loud, making it overpower everything else going on in the scene, and it's actually really unpleasant to listen to. Anyways, the zombies make it inside the precinct, and there's a pretty okay part where they have to thin their ranks in this claustrophobic-ass hallway, and maybe it's just me, but this part really reminded me of that George Romero Resident Evil 2 commercial Capcom filmed in Japan. So they make it out, and Irons leads them to the orphanage, which I forgot to count in the beginning as an RE2 remake reference, so let's go ahead and remedy that. Anyways, this place looks great. The Spencer mansion had a tendency to look like a soundstage thanks to piss-poor lighting and color grading, but this spot shows at least a portion of the people working on this thing actually knew what they were doing. Continuing with the positives, this is a great little suspenseful liquor reveal. One that is sadly immediately ruined by Lisa Trevor, who is pulling some shit that's gonna look great in a movie trailer, but not so good in a movie you actually want to take seriously. So the liquor gets a hold of Irons, resulting in what I think is some great looking prosthetics. Maybe they should have done this instead of the terrible looking CG throughout the entire movie? Possibly? Well, the liquor looks great also, and I wish we had more time to appreciate that, but right now we have to watch Lisa fist fight one, because movies. Of course, keeping in mind that Lisa has only been in a room with Claire for a total of 3 minutes for her entire life, and not only recognizes her well enough to know what she looks like as a full-grown adult, but is also willing to kill for her. After Lisa's MMA debut, she shows the group how to access a secret passageway between the orphanage and the mansion, and gives Claire some keys. Now, first things first, obvious RE2 reference, but call me crazy, I actually thought it was really cool hiding the keyhole in plain sight like this. Very Resident Evil of them, if you ask me. After this, we're taken back to Chris in the mansion, which sets up one of the cooler scenes in the movie. Chris gets attacked and his flashlight goes out, so we only get brief glimpses of what's going on from his muzzle flash. I'll give it up to the guys who made the movie for this one. It was actually really well executed. The scene that follows it, where his lighter intermittently goes out though, not so much. Then Jill runs in to save the day, and I hate to be picky again, but her weapon doesn't kick even a little, and the muzzle flash looks very CGI. I really wish this would have been handled better, because it would have been an overall great looking scene. Moving back to the underground passage with Claire and the walking piss stain currently going by Leon, and the two come across a projector loaded with this little gem of a home movie. Now, it's definitely cool to see, but I'm just left wondering why they would randomly show this shot-for-shot Code Veronica reference. It seems to me this movie's director has mistaken small, insignificant Easter eggs for a dedication to lore. Like, sure, it's kind of fun watching this blast from the past, but if you were such a huge fan of the series that you felt this needed to be included, then why alter so many of its core characters? I truly just don't get it, but more than that, I'm sort of frustrated at the people who watched this movie and came away feeling like the story was accurate because of these small throwaway 1-second callbacks. Listen, guys, I'm an RE fan too. It is actually cool seeing Itchy Tasty in a movie. I'm down with that, but Resident Evil is not a short series of fun gags. There's an actual story to these games, and it's just flat out not being told here. Well, anyways, we catch back up with Birkin, who's acting pretty nonchalant for a guy who's currently exposing his wife and child to a dead person with all of their organs removed. He's clearly getting ready to take the G-Virus with him and run off, but as you know, Wesker's after it as well. There's a confrontation, the two shoot each other, and when Annette gets her hands on the gun, she is immediately brained. Of course, Birkin injects the G-Virus, which remains one of the only plot points that actually survives the script unmolested, and Sherry grabs the gun thinking she could speedrun her own death, but Jill shoots Wesker to stop him from killing her. The two share a teary-eyed goodbye, and Wesker tells them that Umbrella's gonna nuke the town. So they make their way towards the exit, but a transformed Birkin follows them, and come on, guys, how did you fuck this up? Birkin's eye on his shoulder is so iconic. God. Also, I think it's a little dumb that he's able to formulate full sentences and think logically instead of just screaming his daughter's name and running on instinct, but worse than that is the fact that he's using this newfound ability to talk to just agitate Chris like he's some kind of a movie villain with a twirly mustache or something. Absolute goddess and ruler of the entire universe, Claire Redfield swoops in to save the day, and we are left with what I would call some super sweet CGI gore. The two groups finally reunite, we get to play out RE2's escape sequence, and you know what? If you're dipping so deep into RE lore that you're gonna grab a Code Veronica Easter egg, a quick self-destruct sequence has been activated would have been really nice here. Leon gets the train running, and the crew nearly makes their escape when the Spencer Mansion collapses in on itself, which at first I thought was the town getting destroyed, but I guess it was a separate thing? Well, now that the train's been derailed, Birkin shows up, and he looks pretty okay. I mean, he still doesn't look good against the real assets and lighting in the shot, but design-wise, he looks kinda cool, I guess. Birkin gets a hold of Claire, and Leon runs in with an RPG to do the one and only cool thing he does the entire film. Also, if this blast was strong enough to blow the back of the train car off, maybe the people standing literally inches from it wouldn't be quite so alive anymore, or at the very least, every person in the car would be permanently deaf. Then, of course, the nukes drop, and after the dust settles, our heroes emerge from the rubble with no fanfare, and the movie just cuts to the credits. But that's not the end. There's an extra scene showing a terribly cast Ada Wong having a conversation with a revived Wesker and handing him a pair of glasses because a side effect of his alteration is needing them to see, which I guess we can go ahead and put on the scoreboard with the rest of the empty, lame, mishandled Easter eggs in this movie.
What do you want from me?
Well, what did you think? Do you hate yourself now? Because I might. Now, I know I should be exaggerating a lot here, hamming it up for entertainment's sake to give you guys an idea of how frustrating it was to watch this, but it's just not one of those movies. It's not going to make you scream at your TV and throw shit around the room raging about how bad it was because it's so damn bland it doesn't even warrant a real emotional response. I mean, sure, I definitely have my gripes, but more than anything, it was just boring. And for reference, I love bad zombie movies. You might call me a bit of a connoisseur. Wild Zero, Return of the Living Dead, trust me, I can appreciate a good corny Z flick, but this isn't even deserving of that title. 90% of the damn movie is set up and character establishing, which is not bad to front load, but this damn thing had so many characters to deal with. Chris, Claire, Wesker, Birkin, Leon, and Jill are all given a not insignificant portion of screen time for their own personal arcs, and the result is a movie that doesn't spend more than 1 or 2 minutes on any particular one of them. I'm not really sure what drove these guys to include 2 games worth of story in what was already a very small package, but in case it needs to be said, they failed at that. So I guess as a movie it falls flat on its face, so how does it score as a zombie movie? Well, it's got a runtime of about 1 hour and 47 minutes and includes a grand total of 9 scenes that have any zombies on screen. 10 if you count the one in Birkin's lab that doesn't do anything, so it's certainly not winning any awards there. As a story, it is a huge mess, and the worst part is it really didn't have to be. The games already had stories that could likely be stretched out to a feature length. I mean, sure, you'd have to go in and edit some things while getting creative with inclusions to make sure things flowed well, but instead, these guys thought that they would give their version of an RE story with enough cosmetic similarities that hardcore fans might just be fooled into thinking this was made by fans of the series. It was not, by the way. And for sure, you can have issues with an RE game story. I mean, it's one of the things everybody likes to make fun of, but the fact of the matter is, this studio purchased the rights to make this movie based on that story. It had an audience that enjoyed it. They had to have spent a lot of money to get a hold of this property, and for some reason when they did, the idea was, oh, I know, we'll just alter it so that it's unrecognizable. In my opinion, this is a clear-cut case of hubris. This is a Hollywood writer having something on his desk that says video game on it and assuming immediately that it needs the Hollywood writer's touch. Which is hilarious because the first game on the PS1, not even counting re-releases or director's cut, has already grossed more than 7 times the amount this movie has and will ever get. Okay, maybe I'm a little more pissed off than I originally let on. Anyways, one thing that really stood out to me was that they thought characters in the original story weren't connected enough to each other and added a whole lot of contrived, stupid ones of their own, and that's insane. I mean, let's be real here, RE as a whole was already a story of ridiculously dense connections. There's effectively 6 or 7 people in the RE universe, and everything of any importance either happens to or around the general vicinity of one of those characters. The last thing we need is about 8 or 9 more connections on that list. And worse than that, the whole Jill loves Wesker or Birkin raised Chris things only ever amount to maybe 3 total lines of dialogue throughout the entire movie. They weren't even changes that served some kind of narrative purpose. Like I said, I get the feeling that people working on this movie just assumed a video game story can't be good by default, and the one thing keeping it from greatness was them not being involved in its creation. So here's hoping Welcome to Raccoon City's abject critical failure really drove home the fact that whoever made these idiotic decisions is far less talented and skilled at movie making than they thought. And I think that's going to be a lesson no one attached to this project is likely to ever learn, seeing as how it actually managed to turn a profit despite receiving horrible press and reviews. So while I'd love this to end on a good note where these assholes who think they know more than us about our favorite series get their just rewards, that just never seems to happen with this property. And I'm afraid it's looking like we RE fans are stuck in this cycle. We get hyped up about an RE movie, it turns out bad and we check out, while for some reason the general public picks it up. Then we have to endure a series of shitty action flicks made for the lowest common denominator bearing the name of our favorite video game franchise. And I'm not saying this influx of regular-ass normal people into the scene has anything to do with the games often taking that same path, but we both know I'm thinking it. So yeah, we got screwed here, guys, but I think the best way to handle this is just to brush it off our shoulders. Sure, it was a real kick to the balls, but you have to sort of forget about it. Don't get into arguments online, don't give the thing any free advertising. It's kind of like when someone does you wrong. Sometimes the best revenge is just to show them how little you think about them or what they did to piss you off. Now, is that kind of petty? Yeah, maybe, but I don't think this movie is worth getting all worked up about. So if possible, let's all try to collectively forget it even exists. Hell, I just reviewed the damn thing and I'm already halfway there. Well, thanks for forcing this one on me, guys. Your hatred for my sanity is inspiring in a way. I'll catch up with all you fools next time, hopefully with a video covering Infinite Darkness. But until then, thank you all very much for watching the Resident Evil Retrospective. Hey guys, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little mad at you, but if you're looking for more movie reviews from me, I'll have some here linked on screen, as well as a link to my Patreon where you can support more content like this, or preferably not like this. A like, subscribe, comment, or kiss on the cheek is always appreciated, and I'll talk to all of you again when I've forgiven you for what you've done to me.